Thank you so much for inviting me here today. The last time I was on this stage was almost 40 years ago when I was participating in a debate. So this does bring back some memories, but clearly I'm trying something quite different today. So I've spent almost all of my career in financial services, with 3 years in the middle in management consulting. As you heard, I started with Citibank doing commercial banking, went to McKinsey, then spent 11 years at Morgan Stanley, mostly in Hong Kong. And then in 2008, I moved to Temasek to do private equity. I've spent the last 16 years at Temasek in various investment roles, and I'm currently the chief investment officer. What a boring, straitjacketed corporate career. But it's very unlike all the other speakers after me who'll come and they've done inspiring things, they've done creative things. And it led me to think as to really what can I share with you that would be relevant today. Because things have changed so much since I started working over the last 40 years. When I was in school, your age, private equity, which is what I've been doing in the last 16 years, didn't even exist as an industry. The internet didn't exist. And the pace of change is so much faster today. They say that artificial intelligence or AI is going to transform the world and change a number of industries. A few years ago, everyone would have told you, you need to learn coding. That's a critical skill. Today, they're saying that artificial intelligence will make coders largely redundant. Google has already said that they need 25% fewer coding software engineers because of AI. I don't know how many people of you have heard of Ray Kurzweil. He's a well-known futurist who makes predictions and has a pretty good track record of success in predictions. And a few years ago, he said that by the early 2030s, we will have high bandwidth connectivity between your brain and the cloud, which will make everyone much more intelligent. No more fear of exams. It is cool, but it's also very scary. I don't know as to whether this will come true, when it will come true. What I do know is that many of the careers that exist today will not exist 15 years from now. But there will be new careers that you can't even imagine about today. So it's very difficult to give advice to anyone about how they should think of their career for the next 15 to 30 years. However, when I was thinking about my own career, I realized that there were some lessons that I've learned that are timeless. They're as relevant today in the world of AI as they were 40 years ago when we didn't have cell phones and we had an 8-year waiting list to get a landline phone in India. So what I'm going to try and do is share some of those stories with you and see if there's some lessons which resonate with you. The first is learn to benchmark yourself correctly. So when I was at Scindia, I wanted to go to IIT. Why? Because I was good at science and everyone thought I should go to IIT. Anyway, I loved my time here. I did a lot of extracurricular activities. I did debates, plays, sports, and didn't feel I really needed to spend the time doing coaching classes. But I had always done well in school, so I was pretty sure I would get in. I did the exams. I didn't do well in them, but I thought others would have done worse. Anyway, the day the results came out, I was in Delhi. And those days, there was nothing online, so I went to IIT Delhi, where the results were up on a notice board. And I went there to see what my rank was. And I looked up and down, and my name wasn't there. I didn't get in. It was a difficult period for me, difficult to accept. Anyway, I went to St. Stephen's College. A few years later, I was at IIM Ahmedabad. And there, about 1/3 of my class were people from IIT. And out there, I did better than almost every one of them academically. I was in the top 2 to 3% of my class. So what changed? I hadn't gone smarter. They hadn't got dumber. I guess I knew who my competition was. I knew who I had to benchmark myself against. That's easier to do if your competition is around you, like it was at IIM. But in life, very often it isn't. And you have to make an effort to find out who you should be benchmarking yourself against. I mean, that's true in almost everything you do. I was looking to see you now have archery out here. If you're the archery captain and you want to become a professional, who are you going to benchmark yourself against? Inter-school competitions, nationals, international tournaments? In business too, it's the same issue. Even if you're a small business with a retail store, a kirana store, who should you benchmark yourself against? Other kirana stores in your neighborhood? Or should you be benchmarking with Blinkit? By the way, in case you're wondering how all this slide relates to everything that I'm saying, what you see out here are what in Japan are called koi fish. Koi fish are unusual in the sense that they grow depending on the environment they're in. When they're in a bowl, they're small, but you put them in a lake, and they can grow to be 3 feet long. So there's something called Koi's law, which they talk about in Japan, saying that people like koi fish grow to the dimensions of their boundaries. So it's important that you don't define your boundaries too narrowly. By the way, I realize that you guys don't need to worry about that, because at lunch today, I was just commenting to someone that the food here is so much better than it was when we were there 40 years ago. And someone told me, yeah, but the children and the parents, they all complain about the food. I said, yeah, that's because I'm benchmarking against 40 years ago, and these guys here are benchmarking against the Taj Mahal Hotel. So you guys are thinking high, which is good. Anyway, so how do you benchmark yourself correctly? One way to do it, of course, is to be around in an environment where your competition is. That's why a lot of people want to go to IIT, go and sit in quota. But that has trade-offs, and frankly, in a lot of other things, it's not even practical to do because you may not know who your competition is. So how do you get to know what you don't know? And if you're an exporter, how do you know who's the right competition in some other part of the world? So one way to address that, I found, is through networking. So one way to do it is through networking. That is basically building relationships with people who may know more than you and who are willing to help you. Try and look out for mentorship, people who are willing to mentor you. You can do that by leveraging communities you're a part of. Scindia School Old Boys community is one such community. Many people will not respond to you, but I've been surprised that when you reach out to people, how many people are willing to be there to help you if you can connect with them. On the issue of building networks and relationships, a mentor of mine once told me, knowledge is good, know-how is better, but know who is best. In my career, the best investments I've made are ones that I saw through relationships I built over a number of years, not because of a spark of brilliance I had. So I'll give you a couple of examples. I invested in 2014 in Zomato and Policy Bazaar, companies you may be familiar with, when they were still private. And I got to know them because a close friend of mine, who was an investor in the company, approached me about it. And I trusted him. The reason he approached me because he was comfortable working with me as a co-investor because he knew me and trusted me. People always want to work with people whom they like and whom they trust. Wouldn't you? Trust is such an important thing in life, which is what, gets me to the point of integrity. Don't do anything that you wouldn't do if someone was looking at you. And if you make a mistake, own up to it. It will have some consequences. You may hurt in the short term, but if you try and hide it, you will compound the problems. One lie leads to another lie. I've seen so many careers destroyed about it. The first time this struck me, this issue about trust and integrity, was when I was in Scindia School. I was in class 12, and on a Sunday, without permission, I went into the city, ran down, as they say, and went to meet a friend of mine at SKV. I came up, my housemaster, Mr. Bharadwaj, had been looking for me. And he asked me, he said, where have you been? And I was going to make something up. I don't know what happened. I said, I went to meet a friend of mine at SKV. And look, I got reprimanded for it, maybe got a slight punishment. But after that, he would always tell everyone, look, Rohit was honest enough to admit what he did. I will always trust him. He will never lie. And that's something I can tell you. A reputation for integrity is very difficult to build up. It takes a long time. But once you have it, it's an invaluable asset. So don't let it go. And if you get someone's trust, make sure that you don't break it. Taking risks. So all of you take some risks at some time or the other. I took some risks. I moved from banking to consulting. Didn't quite work out for me. I went back into banking. And it didn't hurt my career in any way. In fact, many of the networks I built or relationships I built at McKinsey, I'm still in touch with, and they're valuable to me even today. But I took some other risks. I moved from Morgan Stanley, which is a multinational company, to Temasek, which is owned by the Singapore government. Very different cultures. And those risks worked out for me. But when I look back, I was just moving from one blue chip institution to the other with very little downside. I was very risk averse. If you ask me, the thing that I regret most is that I didn't take more risks, more bold risks in my career, especially early in my career. Because the cost of doing that early in a career is very low. With very few exceptions, whether you're an architect or a doctor or an entrepreneur or an artist or anything else, in most situations, you get very little recognition in the first 10 to 15 years compared to later in your career. I can give my own example from a cheap monetary perspective, because in finance, people like to think in terms of money. But 90% of my income in my life has been earned after the age of 40. So I could very easily have taken risks earlier in my career, and if they went wrong, it's not a big deal. Do that because it allows you to expand your horizons. It will probably allow you to realize your full potential. And unlike me, you'll probably not end up in a straitjacketed, boring corporate career. So take risks. You guys are going to live to 100 years. So if you make a mistake, there's a lot of time to make up for it. You heard about this morning. You learn in school, but you have to keep learning all your life. The things that I've done well, things I've regretted, but the one thing I've liked is the fact that I've always had a steep learning curve. I've always explored and wanted to do new things. In Temasek, too, I've been here 16 years. I've done 10 different roles, various different areas. And whenever I find that I'm not excited about what I'm doing, that I'm not learning, I feel it's time to move on. Now, there'll always be ups and downs, and I'm not saying that at the first sign of anything difficult, just drop it and move on. But if you find that everything is just like another day, every day is like another, and you're not really learning and growing, you really need to step back and think, why are you doing what you're doing? It's something that, I'll give you an example. We have at Temasek a program where once every 7 years, you're allowed to take a sabbatical for 6 months to go and explore anything you want to do, to sort of explore, maybe just find new horizons. And very few people take up that opportunity. Why? Either because they believe they're indispensable, more likely because they're too busy with what they're doing day to day and just don't have time to think about what else they want to do, or they're scared that they'll get fired when they're away and won't have a job to come back to. So it comes back to a question of taking risks, but I realized when I was preparing for this talk that I've been in Temasek for 16 years and I've never taken the sabbatical. So what I'm going to learn from you today by talking to you is making sure I do that, and before I retire, I try something completely different. So the last story I'm going to tell you is more about a friend of mine from Ahmedabad. He, 2 years after graduation, decided to become an entrepreneur. And in the early 90s, not too many people became entrepreneurs, but he wanted to do that. And for several years, he kept tweaking his business model, improving a little bit, but didn't really break out. 7 to 10 years down the line, most of his classmates had become senior people in corporates, leading good lives. He was still living in his father's house, getting a salary of a few thousand rupees. Used to go and teach at IMT Ghaziabad to get some supplementary income, but kept at it. Finally, 10 years in, he got his first VC funding. Suddenly, the business started getting more traction. He IPO'd the company, and today that is a multi-billion-dollar company in the stock markets today. His name is Sanjeev Bikhchandani. The company was InfoEdge, which runs Naukri.com. And today, his stake in the company is worth several $billion. But more importantly, he's had a tremendous impact on the startup ecosystem out here, because of which he was awarded the Padma Shri. So you can see this is a common saying Lionel Messi, it took me 17 years and 114 days to become an overnight success. Success doesn't come easily. You got to work at it. You got to work hard. You got to have patience. It's got to take time. All of us, and I realize for myself, we're too focused on instant gratification. And you can get it, but you will sacrifice your long-term potential if you just focus on short-term gratification. So look, all of you will have your own goals that you want to pursue. You'll all do them in different ways. I can't tell you what to do. What I thought would be useful for me was to just share some of the lessons I have learned, which probably may increase the chances of your success, and more importantly, allow you to have a more fruitful and satisfying career. Thank you very much.